Have you ever wondered what really happens after you walk away from a relationship that has been draining you for years? Most people imagine that the story ends the moment the door closes behind you. They assume the one who leaves is the one who loses, and the one who stays behind remains comfortably in control. But what if the opposite is often true? What if your departure becomes the moment everything they believed about themselves begins to crack? The reality is that when you finally leave a toxic, one-sided, or emotionally exhausting relationship, you are not simply ending a chapter. In many cases, you are disrupting an entire system that depended on your presence. You are challenging assumptions that may have existed for years. You are forcing someone to confront a reality they never expected to face, a life in which you are no longer available, no longer reacting, and no longer revolving around them. This is not a story about revenge. It is not about making someone suffer. It is about understanding the psychological impact that occurs when a person loses access to someone they assumed would always remain within reach. Why does that impact hit so hard? Why do some people seem more disturbed by your absence than they ever were by your presence? And why does silence often speak louder than 1,000 arguments? The first shock often has very little to do with love and everything to do with control. Many people become so comfortable in a relationship that they stop appreciating the person beside them. They begin to assume that no matter what they do, no matter how much they neglect, dismiss, or take the other person for granted, that person will remain. Have you ever seen someone ignore a blessing simply because they believe it can never leave? That false sense of certainty creates a dangerous illusion. They stop seeing you as an independent human being with choices, emotions, and limits. Instead, they begin to see your presence as guaranteed. Then one day you leave. Suddenly the script changes. Suddenly the person they believed would never walk away is gone. The shock is not simply about missing you. It is about realizing they were wrong. Their mental image of reality collides with the truth. The person they underestimated found the courage to choose themselves. The person they assumed would tolerate everything finally said enough. This realization can be deeply unsettling because it forces them to question their own judgment. How did they fail to see this coming? Why didn't they recognize the signs? Why did they believe they had more power than they actually did? As those questions begin to emerge, another realization follows close behind. Life continues. This may sound obvious, but for someone who believed they were the center of your world, it can be difficult to accept. They expected your departure to be followed by collapse. They imagined endless messages, desperate attempts to reconnect, or visible signs that you could not function without them. Instead, they discover something unexpected. You keep going. Day by day, you rebuild your routine, you focus on your goals, you rediscover forgotten parts of yourself. You laugh again, you sleep better. You begin creating a life that no longer depends on their approval. Why is this so difficult for some people to process? Because it destroys the illusion that your value came from them. If your happiness survives their absence, then perhaps they were never as essential as they believed. If your confidence grows after the relationship ends, then perhaps they were not your source of strength. This realization can be far more painful than the breakup itself. It forces them to reconsider the entire relationship. They begin replaying memories in their minds. They remember moments they overlooked, sacrifices they dismissed, kindness they took for granted. Only after something is gone do many people understand what it truly meant to them. Then comes one of the most powerful forces in any breakup: silence. Why does silence affect people so deeply? Because the human mind hates unanswered questions. Many individuals secretly expect a reaction after a separation. They expect anger, sadness, pleading, or attempts to reconnect. Any reaction confirms that they still occupy space in your emotional world. But what happens when there is no reaction? What happens when the messages never arrive? What happens when weeks pass and your silence remains unbroken? At first they may feel confident. They tell themselves you will eventually reach out. Then uncertainty begins to creep in. They start checking their phone more often. They wonder what you are doing. They ask mutual friends about you. They search for clues that explain your absence. Slowly, silence transforms from something they expected into something they cannot understand. The questions begin multiplying. Have you moved on? Have you forgotten them? Are you happier now? Is there someone else in your life? The irony is that silence often says more than words ever could. It communicates a simple message. Your peace has become more important than continuing a painful cycle. Silence does not mean you never cared. It does not mean you were never hurt. Sometimes it means you finally learned that not every wound deserves another conversation. Not every disappointment deserves another chance. Not every person deserves unlimited access to your emotional energy. As time passes, another shift can occur. The roles begin to reverse. The person who once felt secure may become the one searching for answers. The person who once expected attention may become the one hopping for it. Have you ever noticed how quickly confidence can disappear when validation is removed? Many people feel powerful because someone constantly provides them with admiration, attention, forgiveness, or emotional support. They mistake what they receive from others for something they naturally possess. Then the source disappears. Suddenly they feel the absence. Suddenly they miss the encouragement, the loyalty, the patience, and the emotional safety they once took for granted. Some try to compensate by showing exaggerated happiness online. Others rush into new relationships. Some become obsessed with proving they are doing better than ever. Yet beneath these efforts often lies a deeper question. Why does this loss still bother me? Why can't I stop thinking about someone I assumed I no longer needed? The answer is simple. Losing access to a person who genuinely cared can reveal uncomfortable truths. It can expose emotional dependencies that were hidden beneath pride and certainty. It can force someone to confront aspects of themselves they spent years avoiding. Yet perhaps the most important lesson has nothing to do with them. It has everything to do with you. What if the greatest victory after a painful relationship is not making someone regret losing you? What if the greatest victory is reclaiming yourself? Many people spend years trying to change someone else's behavior. They beg for respect. They fight for appreciation. They exhaust themselves attempting to earn treatment that should have been freely given. Eventually, a powerful realization emerges. You cannot control another person's choices. You cannot force someone to value what they refuse to value. You cannot build a healthy relationship alone. The only thing truly within your control is your own response. You can choose whether to stay or leave. You can choose whether to continue suffering or begin healing. You can choose whether your future remains chained to your past. This is where real freedom begins. Not when the other person apologizes. Not when they regret their actions. Not when they finally understand your worth. Freedom begins when your happiness no longer depends on any of those outcomes. It begins when you stop measuring your value through someone else's attention. It begins when you understand that your peace is too precious to be traded for endless disappointment. Think about it. What is more powerful, spending years trying to prove your worth to someone who refuses to see it, or quietly building a life so meaningful that their opinion becomes irrelevant? What is more liberating, winning an argument or no longer needing to have it? What is more healing, hearing the apology you deserve or reaching a point where your recovery no longer depends on receiving it? The truth is that leaving is not always an act of rejection. Sometimes it is an act of self-respect. Sometimes it is the moment you stop abandoning yourself in order to keep someone else comfortable. Sometimes it is the first honest decision you have made in years. And while the other person may experience confusion, regret, loss, or shock, those feelings belong to their journey, not yours. Your responsibility is not to manage their reaction. Your responsibility is to protect your own well-being, rebuild your confidence, and continue moving forward. In the end, the most remarkable thing about walking away is not what happens to them. It is what happens to you. The noise fades. The confusion clears. The constant emotional tug-of-war comes to an end. You begin to remember who you were before the relationship convinced you to doubt yourself. You rediscover strengths you forgot you possessed. And one day, without even realizing it, you look back and understand something profound. The moment that felt like an ending was actually the beginning of your freedom.